Story one: kicked out of the house because mom sided with stepdad and his kids. But they forgot I'm the real owner. Now it's time to take it back. It never occurred to me, 35 million, that my father's meticulous estate planning would ultimately cause our family to fall apart. There's a lot to digest here, and I want to make sure I'm giving you the whole picture. So let me start at the beginning. One of the big tech businesses in Seattle employs me as a senior software architect. My dad always had this kind of job in mind for me. "Technology is the future," he would exclaim proudly after I was accepted to UW's computer science program. He had a profitable construction business and wasn't a techie, but he had a remarkable knack for predicting trends. Beginning with the recession of the late 1980s, Dad started his construction business from the ground up throughout some of the most difficult periods in the industry. He took on projects that other contractors wouldn't take on, using only a pickup truck and his tools. Back then, Mom told me, they lived in a small apartment and were frugal, but Dad had this unwavering faith in his vision. He would frequently remark, "The key is to build relationships, not just buildings." That way of thinking got him through his difficult early years. Dad's business was unique because of the way he treated both customers and staff. Even if it meant losing some bids to rivals who made exaggerated deadline promises, he was a firm believer in open pricing and truthful schedules. "First, establish trust," he would advise. He was correct when he said, "The profits will follow." His business, which was renowned for taking on intricate restoration projects requiring both technical expertise and historical sensitivity, rose to prominence in the Seattle area by the mid-1990s. Because of the devotion he had developed with his clients and staff, Dad's business survived the 2008 financial crisis when many construction companies were failing. He didn't fire a single employee during that period. Rather, he reduced his personal income to zero and took out a second mortgage on his cherished Mustang. I learned more about leadership from watching him handle that issue than I could have from any management course. "Your employees are your extended family," he told me. "You take care of them, they'll take care of your business." I didn't realize at the time how much his managerial approach affected my own career. Many of his ideas were put to use when I was promoted to team lead at my software business. I established thorough documentation procedures for our code, much as he had kept thorough project logs for every building site. I was able to lead my development team through challenging project deadlines thanks to his attention to fostering good relationships. I met Emily, 34F, at a hackathon in my junior year. She assisted in planning the event while pursuing her studies in business administration. Despite my lack of sleep, energy drink addiction, and likely messy appearance, she somehow found my love of code charming. From the first time Dad laid eyes on her, he fell in love. He told me, "She grounds you," following their first meal together. "Don't let this one get away." After college, Dad even assisted Emily in launching her own marketing firm. He introduced her to his network of local company owners, showed her how he drafted his contracts, and shared his business objectives with her. He would tell us, "Success isn't just about what you know, it's about helping others succeed too." Dad was always imparting his expertise and educating. Those formative years were unique. Emily and I would always make the drive to my parents' house on Sundays to have dinner. We would all sit on the back deck that Dad had constructed and chat about everything and nothing while he lit the grill. Even though he couldn't understand the majority of the technical details of my most recent work, he would still ask in-depth inquiries. Mom used to say, "There they go again with the computer talk," with a loving eye roll. Dad's pride and joy was the house itself. He purchased it with the proceeds from his first significant construction job in the 1990s, which was a historic restoration project that made his business famous. In one of Seattle's older neighborhoods, this lovely craftsman-style home features a wraparound porch and a garage that he transformed into the most well-organized workshop you've ever seen. Labeled and placed with almost fanatical precision, each tool has its place. Dad handled the house as though it were a living example of his skill. Every renovation was meticulously organized and recorded. Every repair, improvement, and paint job was documented in a thorough spreadsheet that he maintained. A house is like a living thing, he would say as he demonstrated for me how to clean the gutters or inspect the foundation. He maintained a maintenance regimen that included everything from checking the roof after winter storms to changing air filters. Neglect the little things, and they become big problems. In addition to being his haven, the workshop served as a classroom where he taught me about subjects other than tools. In addition to adding unique storage options and a workbench he made especially for teaching me woodworking, he had completely renovated the garage himself. He would say, "Every piece of wood has its own story," as we were working. The pegboard wall with delineated shapes for each tool wasn't just about organization. It was his method of teaching me that everything has a place and a purpose. Our job is to help tell that story. Our family held weekends in high regard. In that garage, Dad and I would work on his 1967 Mustang for hours on end. When I was 12, Dad had purchased it for restoration, claiming it would be a project that would strengthen our bond as father and son. That vehicle turned into a life lessons classroom. His advice, which I still abide by now, was straightforward. Always use the right tool for the job. Shortcuts look tempting, but they'll cost you in the long run. Although Dad might have completed the Mustang project in 1 year if he had so desired, it took 3 years. However, he was more interested in the process than the final destination. I learned everything from project management to fundamental mechanics from him. We took pictures of every component we changed, recorded each step, and maintained thorough logs of our development. This isn't just about fixing a car, he would affirm. It's about learning how to break down big problems into manageable pieces. I found that lesson to be really helpful in my profession as a software developer. Emily and I purchased a small home around 20 minutes from my parents' house after we were married. Although Dad insisted that we take out the mortgage in our names, he assisted us with the down payment. "You need to build your own credit history," he clarified. "It's about standing on your own feet." He taught me how to install ceiling fans and fix drywall as he worked on our renovations on the weekends. He was preparing me for the responsibilities of homeownership even back then. At this time, my career was really taking off. I just received a promotion to team lead, overseeing a team that was creating cloud infrastructure solutions. I enjoyed every second of it, even if the hours were long and the strain was great. During my lunch breaks, Dad would frequently call to check in, without discussing anything specific. He was aware of the demands of managing a group and overseeing the work of others. "Remember to delegate," he would say. "You can't do everything yourself, just like I can't build a house alone." When Dad initially stated feeling exhausted all the time, we were discussing the possibility of starting a family. He continued to put off seeing a doctor, despite Mom's insistence. "Just working too hard," he would dismiss our worries. He was working on his largest project to date, a multi-million-dollar development deal that would have established his business for the ensuing 10 years. In retrospect, I regret not pressing harder and insisting on those examinations sooner. Perhaps things might have turned out differently. At the time, the business was expanding quickly. Dad was discussing growing into historical restoration projects in the Pacific Northwest and had recently launched a second office in Portland. He had established a reputation for updating the infrastructure of historic structures without sacrificing their character. He would tell his clients, "It's about embracing the future while respecting the past." Everything he accomplished, including his personal and professional life, was impacted by his love of preservation. The Mustang was the subject of our last meaningful discussion. He was discussing taking it to car shows now that we had completed the restoration. When he remarked, "We should sign up for the Pacific Northwest Classic," his eyes glowed like a child's. He continued to plan for the future until the very end, saying, "Show these youngsters what a real muscle car looks like." It began like any other morning until everything changed. When Mom called, my phone buzzed while I was in an early meeting. We were in the midst of an important project conversation, so I nearly didn't respond. But I had to go out and take it for some reason. Mom was crying so hard she was having trouble speaking. Dad had passed out on a construction site. He had left by the time I arrived at the hospital. According to the physicians, it was a sudden and severe heart attack. He was only 58. The weeks following Dad's passing were a haze of mourning and bureaucracy. The funeral was crowded. Dad's business and community involvement had impacted countless people. Suppliers, contractors, and even rival businesses came to show their support. Everybody shared a story about how Dad had supported them, given them advice, or simply been there for them when they needed someone to confide in. One old craftsman told me how, despite being unable to work during a protracted illness, Dad had managed to keep him on the payroll. "Your father understood that business was about people first," he stated. The workers of the company were heartbroken. Many of them had known Dad for decades, and they told me things I had never heard before, like how he had paid for the college textbooks of one foreman's daughter, assisted another through a divorce, or remained late to teach apprentices the nuances of historical restoration. With pictures and handwritten remarks from both clients and employees, the workplace conference room was transformed into an unofficial monument. We were all surprised by how well Dad had prepared for everything. His attorney, Mr. Anderson, summoned us in for a meeting a week following the funeral. He took out this enormous accordion file that read, "Family Security Protocol," and was neatly handwritten by Dad. Dozens of carefully arranged papers with comprehensive instructions for various areas of his land were found within. I was given a 3-day tour of Dad's estate paperwork by Mr. Anderson. Each color-coded container had personal notes outlining his decisions in addition to legal paperwork. "I've never seen an estate plan this thorough in my 35 years of practice," Mr. Anderson remarked. Dad had even included a 5-year business transition plan with backup plans for various circumstances. After that, Mom began going to her church's bereavement support group. She first met Steve, 58 million, there. Initially, she only mentioned him in passing. Steve suggested this great book about healing, or Steve said it's normal to feel this way. He was one of the group facilitators and had lost his wife to cancer 2 years earlier. Even if it seemed a little early, I was happy that she was receiving support. I was reminded by Emily that everyone experiences grief in a unique way. Every Tuesday night, the church grief support group met. Before long, Mom was attending church functions with Steve more often. After services, coffee gatherings became lunch meetings, which in turn became dinner dates. Our family friends began to worry about how quickly their friendship was developing. At a family get-together, my Aunt Jane pulled me aside because she was concerned that Mom was hurrying into things to make up for Dad's absence. Mom's changes became more apparent. Her haircut changed. She started dressing differently, and she even threw out the garden that Dad had helped her create. Every time I questioned these changes, she would respond, "It's time for a fresh start." Dad was hardly ever mentioned by the woman who used to spend hours narrating her life with him. It went more quickly than any of us had anticipated. Mom announced that Steve was moving in 6 months after Dad's death. James, 30M, and Lisa, 32F, his own grown children, felt it would be beneficial to bring life back into the house. I made an effort to be sympathetic, but it seemed like she was in a rush to replace everything Dad had constructed. I'm at a crossroads right now. How can I preserve Dad's legacy without jeopardizing Mom's chances for happiness? Emily advises me to strike a balance, but I can't help but think of Dad's letter. "Son, preserve those memories." First update. I apologize for the wait for the update and appreciate all of the advice you gave on my previous article. 3 months have passed since my last post, and things have become much worse. Steve's domineering demeanor used to bother me, but now he acts as though he owns the house my dad left me. Steve made the decision to begin a significant restoration project last month, without even asking my permission. The built-in bookshelves my dad had made for the living room were being torn up by contractors when I visited one weekend. As if he owned the building, Steve was watching over them and directing them to just throw all this old wood in the dumpster. These were the final project Dad and I worked on together before he became ill, so they were more than just shelves. He responded angrily when I approached him. He said, "Look, son," with a condescending emphasis on the pronoun. "This house needs to be brought into the 21st century. Your father's taste was, well, dated. We're doing you a favor by increasing the property value." I reminded him that any modifications required my consent legally. Mom obviously agreed with him, but he simply chuckled and added, "Your mother and I live here. We don't need permission to improve our home." "Steve knows about these things," she acknowledged. "He's just trying to help." The woman who formerly loved those bookshelves and used to place her collection of antique teacups on them for Christmas now acts as though they were just taking up room. I showed her Dad's thorough house maintenance plans, but she disregarded them as dwelling in the past. Additionally, the relationship with Steve's children has deteriorated. James has taken over Dad's workshop and transformed it into a CrossFit facility. While I was on a business trip, he held a garage sale and sold the majority of Dad's tools. By repainting rooms and installing modern vinyl planks in place of Dad's meticulously refinished hardwood floors, Lisa is treating the space as though it were her own personal design project. One evening after dinner, Steve grabbed me aside and said, "Since we're paying to live here, we should have our names on the deed. It's only fair." I had to explain to him that they don't pay a mortgage because Dad's planning has paid for the house in full. They don't even cover their rent. All maintenance expenses, insurance, and property taxes are paid for by me. Emily recommended that we stop making weekly visits. Now that Emma is here, she is correct. No one benefits from the stress in that household. However, taking a back seat has only made Steve more confident. He began sending me bills for improvements that I never approved, and he began making them more regularly. I should be more sympathetic of Mom's new life, according to Mom's sister, who called me recently. I attempted to explain Dad's intentions and my legal obligations, but she simply accused me of being trapped in the past. Steve makes her happy. "Why can't you just let them make the house their own?" she asked. I found out this week that the growth markers that recorded my height from the ages of 3 to 18 had been removed from the kitchen door frame. Every birthday, Dad would measure me and write the date next to each mark. "It's just an old door frame. We can't keep every piece of wood just because your father touched it," Mom remarked when I confronted her about it. I now spend more time sitting in Dad's old chair, the only piece of furniture I was able to keep, in my own garage. Mr. Anderson advises me to begin considering long-term fixes. Legally, the house belongs to me, but I will eventually have to make some difficult choices regarding its destiny. When does being the bad guy become more important than preserving your father's legacy? And when your whole family opposes you, how do you defend the moral high ground? Update 2. I appreciate all of your advice regarding my previous post. The situation has reached a breaking point, and I've finally made a choice that will most likely alter everything. I spoke with my financial advisor about the house situation last week. We may make a sizable rental income, enough to cover Emma's future college fund, because nearby property values have risen by 40% in the last 3 years. I discovered during the discussion that I had been so preoccupied with the sentimental elements that I had failed to take into account the financial ramifications of allowing Mom and Steve to live rent-free. Everything went haywire when I brought this up to Mom in our weekly conversation. She yelled into the phone, "You can't do this to us. This is where we call home. Steve has worked really hard on it." She refused to listen when I tried to explain that I was only considering my choices. She continued to talk about all the enhancements they had made, utterly disregarding the fact that I had never given my approval for these changes. An hour later, Steve called. He was upset, and his tone was different from his usual arrogant demeanor. "Listen here," he announced. In this house, we have established a life. Because you're missing your father, you can't just walk in and ruin everything. He interrupted me when I attempted to explain the financial issues, stating that they now had sweat equity in the property. I reminded him that the house belonged to me legally. There's a reason why Dad left it to me. Your father isn't here anymore, he replied. You must consider the living. I talked to Emily about it and talked to Mr. Anderson before deciding on it the following day. When I arrived at the house, Mom and Steve were working on yet another remodeling job. In the dining room, they had begun ripping out the original crown molding, which Dad had specifically milled to blend in with the house's antique style. That image made me more determined. They have 2 weeks to find another place to live, I told them. Mom burst into tears at once, accusing me of being callous and harsh. Steve tried to scare me by arguing about my inability to throw them out on the street. He began enumerating all of their local ties, including his place of employment, their church, and their neighborhood pals. When faced with challenging circumstances, I maintained my composure and firmness, as my father had taught me. I declared, this is my property. Dad left it to me for a reason, and I'm exercising my legal right as the owner. Steve's cheeks flushed, and he began to enumerate all the money they had spent on upgrades. I informed him that the historical value of the property had actually been diminished by these unapproved alterations. When Lisa returned home and joined the debate, things became worse. Mom utilized her pregnancy as emotional leverage right away. How are you able to treat your stepsister this way? She will give birth to a child. Although Lisa's pregnancy is significant to them, I had to tell them that it does not affect my property rights and that she is not my stepsister. There has been an ongoing assault of emotional manipulation ever since. Mom's whole family has banded together to oppose me. Her sister called, sobbing, and said their parents wanted to make sure Mom was safe. Messages regarding the challenging rental market were left by Steve's brother, a local real estate agent. Long messages on Christian ideals and family loyalty are even coming from distant cousins who I hardly know. Dealing with family friends who have known me since my early years is the most difficult. People who grew up with me now tell me how unhappy they are with my decisions, and every call seems like another tiny betrayal. Some even claim that I'm damaging Dad's standing in the neighborhood. The problem is that this has nothing to do with cruelty or profit. This is about honoring Dad's desires and preserving the things he created. It has been agonizing enough to see them methodically destroy all traces of him. The house was his legacy. I've paid for all of their expenses, allowed them to live rent-free for years, and put up with their unapproved changes. Eventually, enough is enough. They have 2 weeks to come up with new plans. I'm refusing to give in to Mom's constant demands for more time. Mr. Anderson claims that the law is entirely on my side and that I have been more than giving. He is assisting me with creating official paperwork for the notice to vacate, ensuring that everything is accurately documented. I realize that this makes me appear to be the villain in everyone else's tale, but sometimes standing up for what's right requires making difficult choices, even when others disagree. I learned that from my dad. Update 3. We appreciate everyone's help at this trying time. Things have come to an unavoidable end, therefore this will likely be my last update. I assigned Mom and Steve a 2-week deadline, but it's already passed. The past 2 weeks have been the longest of my life. They have been filled with guilt-tripping, continual emotional manipulation, and progressively frantic attempts to get me to change my mind. Mom did everything she could. Every day she called, oscillating between fury and tears. She would say, I changed your diapers, one day. I gave up everything for you, she would yell the next day. Steve also changed strategies, trying to negotiate instead of using intimidation. He recommended establishing a formal lease and offered to begin paying rent. I couldn't rely on them to uphold whatever agreements we made, though, given what they had done to Dad's house. When I got to the house, there were people gathering on the front lawn 3 days prior to the deadline. Mom had enlisted the help of friends from church, family, and even some of Dad's former business partners. They had prepared statements about moral commitments and family responsibilities as part of what amounted to an intervention. I listened to people criticize me for being a bad son for 2 hours. The topic of honoring your parents was discussed by Mom's pastor. Dad's old secretary remembered his generosity with tears in her eyes. My elementary school teacher even came to remind me of the morals my father had attempted to teach me. The hardest part was when Lisa got up and talked about how stress could hurt her unborn child while covering her pregnant abdomen with her hands. While Mom was crying next to her, a few of the church women were glaring at me. It was an expert lesson in manipulating emotions. But during this ambush, an unexpected event occurred. I had a strange sense of serenity as I sat there listening to everyone talk about Dad. People who hadn't even been to his funeral suddenly professing to know what he would have wanted. Dad used to say, "Stand your ground when you know you're right." And I could almost hear his voice in my thoughts. I got to my feet and spoke to the group. I described how Dad planned everything carefully to ensure his family's future and how he had constructed this house by hand. I showed them pictures of Steve's unapproved modifications, including the historical elements he ruined and the fine craftsmanship he removed and replaced with flimsy modern fixtures. After that, I presented them with a letter from Dad outlining his reasons for leaving everything to me. Some of the elder business associates nodded as I read his remarks about trust, accountability, and preserving his legacy. They understood because they'd known Dad, really knew him. Shortly thereafter, the group scattered. While some looked disapproving, the righteous wrath had subsided and others gently apologized as they walked away. Without saying another word, Mom and Steve returned inside. I was there with Mr. Anderson and a locksmith on the morning of the deadline. Although they weren't required, I had hired a security company to be on hand just in case. The house was deserted. The remainder of their possessions were packed into Steve's truck. Steve couldn't help but give me a last poke, but Mom refused to look at me. As he assisted Lisa into his pickup, he asked, "You're happy with yourself? Your father would be so proud of how you've treated your mother." I didn't answer. Dad would have known. I know he had prepared for this possibility. What other reason might he have had for being so explicit in his will? I strolled about the home after they had left. I had underestimated the extent of the harm. Builder-grade materials had been used to replace the original fittings. Dad had painted over or taken out his handcrafted woodwork. We had spent so many weekends at the workshop, and it had changed completely. I have no intention of pursuing damages, but Mr. Anderson documented everything for any legal considerations. I simply want to put this chapter behind me and concentrate on fixing what can be fixed. Some of Dad's old craftsman friends have already been contacted, and they are eager to assist in rebuilding the features that were taken out. For now, Mom is staying with her sister. The majority of my relatives have stopped talking to me altogether. However, some sometimes call to chastise me. On social media, Steve's children continue to share heartbreaking updates about their poor mother being thrown out of her home, but fewer people are responding to each post. Through it all, Emily has been my pillar of support. She reminds me of Dad's letter whenever I begin to doubt myself, expressing his faith in my ability to make the right choices. I will eventually tell Emma about her grandfather and the heritage he attempted to preserve, but she is too little to comprehend what is occurring right now. To restore the house to its original state, I'm collaborating with a restoration professional. We can preserve the spirit of what Dad made, but it won't be perfect. Some things can't be reversed. First, the workshop will be restored. The same place where I learned from my father is where I want my daughter to study. Being the villain in someone else's tale is sometimes the price of doing the right thing. I may never be able to rebuild the relationships I lost, but I can live with the fact that I preserved what my father trusted me with. As Dad used to say, integrity is about doing the right thing, even when it hurts, and not about taking the easy route. I believe he would comprehend, My last update will be this one. I appreciate everyone's support along this journey. Story 2. Mom threw me out to favor her new family, then asked for college money when I became successful. To put things in perspective, my mother gave birth to me at the age of 20, and my biological father was never involved. He never wanted children, she told me, and because they had only been dating for a few months when she became pregnant, she offered him the option to leave, which he did. She stated that because of the bitterness of their breakup, she had chosen not to demand child support from him, and he had also refused to pay. Never talking again was convenient for both of them. She was fortunate to have my grandparents' unwavering support and encouragement, which enabled her to finish her schooling and secure employment. She dated a couple of men while I was younger, and she began dating Harry, a co-worker, when I was about 8 years old. Before getting married, they dated for over 3 years. Although we weren't very close, Harry and I got along well enough to put up with each other being in the house. When my mom became pregnant 4 years after they were married, everyone was overjoyed, including me. In retrospect, I probably should have known what was going to happen, but I was too preoccupied with the idea that my mother would always support me. I hoped Mom wouldn't leave me now because she had endured a lot of challenges raising me by herself. She obviously distanced herself from me after she married Harry, and we began to drift apart, but I thought it was only a phase and that things would improve. During her pregnancy, I did my best to be encouraging, but she appeared to get angrier every time I was there. To avoid disturbing her, I made the decision to become scarce, but it seems that I wasn't inconspicuous enough. She and Harry sat me down for a serious conversation 6 months after she gave birth to twins. They informed me that they couldn't keep me in the house since they had 2 children to look after. They couldn't legally throw me out without getting in trouble because I was still a juvenile, having just turned 16. By highlighting the financial burden of providing for a big family on their meager income, they attempted to persuade me otherwise. Since we had been living comfortably up until that point, I honestly didn't think it was hard to maintain 2 adults, 1 teenager, and 2 kids on the salary of 2 web engineers. They clearly only wanted me gone. I genuinely didn't want to leave, so even at that point I attempted to offer ways to stop it. If money was a problem, I offered to acquire a job, but my mother said she wanted to save money and resources for the children who deserved it more. She stated that they deserved to stay with them more than I did, not that they needed this more. That was all it took for me to decide that I had to leave because it was obvious that no one wanted me. They knew I had enough dignity to know I was unwanted, so they had only nudged me in the right way after I left, without even telling me where I should go. Their strategy was successful. Since they hadn't really evicted me, it wasn't technically an eviction, but I would still consider it to be the same. I felt like I had no other choice after they had forced me into a difficult situation. I went straight to my grandparents' house when I left that day. They wanted to be there for the twins, so even though they were upset about what my mother had done, they didn't cut her off. At 16, I obtained part-time work because I could no longer financially rely on my grandparents due to their advanced age. When my mom and Harry went to visit my grandparents with the kids, I would see them every now and then, but they seldom ever inquired about me. They tended to be very formal, as if they didn't miss me at all, even when they did see me. They actually appeared to be happy without my presence. I was saddened by my mother's apparent decrease in irritability, but I knew there was nothing I could do about it. Until it was time to go to college, I lived with my grandparents. My mom wasn't involved with me even then, so I had to rely on friends to assist me get settled in my dorm because my grandparents weren't old enough or healthy enough. My mom and Harry declined, preferring to preserve money for the twins' future, so I had to take out a student loan, and one of my relatives co-signed for it. Fortunately, one of my uncles agreed to assist if I assured him that he would never be responsible for any of the costs. I worked while I was in college to make sure I wouldn't fall behind on my payments and to give myself a financial advantage. My mother and I hardly spoke once I started college, and only my grandparents were present when I graduated. Not even my mother bothered to congratulate me. In order to avoid being a burden to my elderly grandparents, I began working and lived independently after college. Although I didn't make much money during the first few years, I was still able to pay for groceries, utilities, rent, and even started to pay off my debt while setting money aside for the future. In fact, I would describe that as living on a limited income. Fortunately, things finally got better. It took a while, but I eventually rose through the ranks of my organization. Considering that I received very little assistance, I'm proud of how far I've gone and am now in a rather comfortable position. Unexpectedly, my mother discovered that I earn a good living, even though we haven't spoken for many years. At nearly 33, I currently hold a senior management role at the same organization where I began my career. About 4 months ago, I got a big promotion, but I wanted to keep it a secret, so only a select few individuals knew about it. To thank my uncle for co-signing my loan back when I was having trouble paying for college, I did inform him. According to what I understand, he just met my mom and Harry at a family get-together and urged her to get in touch with me to congratulate me on my success. Even though I'm sure he meant well, it didn't work out because she didn't even get in touch with me to offer congratulations. In the end, my mother learned about it and recently visited my home with Harry, insisting on talking to me. I should note that I haven't spoken to her since I started college. I blocked her everywhere and left her out of my life after graduating, since I didn't think there was any use in hoping she would change her mind. She didn't appear to be negatively impacted, and to be honest, I doubt she even noticed. Only my grandparents, who were aware that I disliked discussing my mother, were in contact with me, and they steered clear of the subject. I didn't really stay in touch with my uncle either, so I was unaware that my mom and Harry had been having financial difficulties for a few years. Only when they arrived at my door and told me how bad things had gotten did I find out. It was wishful thinking, but the only reason I even allowed them inside was because I hoped they would be coming to make amends. They began by stating that they had heard from my uncle about my promotion and how I was one of the youngest individuals in such a prominent position in my firm. Rather than congratulating me on my accomplishment, it seems that they were surprised that I had kept it from them. Ironically, I was taken aback that they expected me to communicate with them at all, much less deliver any positive news. Additionally, they were disappointed that I had shut them out of my life, claiming that it was only because they had prioritized their children above me. They maintained that I should have been old enough to comprehend their rearranged priorities and not harbor resentment as a teenager. They said that I should have supported their decisions rather than going in with my grandparents. I'm not even sure why they thought I would agree with their choice to expel me from the house. They tried to gaslight me into thinking that I was the bad guy for being angry that they had ejected me so they could spend time with their children alone. But that's how they began our reunion after all these years. They talked about how tough the past several years had been for them without even giving me a chance to explain my side of the story. They described how they had launched their own company, but regrettably it did not succeed, resulting in losses. They were now attempting to make up for previous losses, and they desperately needed money as the twins were getting close to college age. I saw then why they had come. They needed financial assistance. They didn't waste any time going right to the point, even trying to soften it by claiming that I could make it up to them by paying for my siblings' schooling, but that at first they were upset that I hadn't contacted them despite performing well. Their attempt to make it seem as though they were doing me a favor by allowing me to pay for the college education of two children I no longer knew astounded me. I told them right away that I wouldn't be doing that, and that it was disrespectful of them to believe they could coerce me into doing so. I became irate and reminded them that they were the reason I had to work during my college years and pay for my own education. Because they wanted to save for their real children, who they believed deserved it more than I did. They had refused to provide me with financial support back then. I assured them that they had no right to expect anything from me now, particularly financial support, since I had never questioned their choice to put the twins first and had just left them alone. They actually no longer had the right to demand that I communicate with them. Furthermore, it wasn't like they were helping me. They pushed me out of the house and effectively forced me out as soon as they believed I was mature enough to manage things on my own. For the following 18 years, they refused to acknowledge my existence. I was still shocked that they had the gall to expect me to aid them now, as if I owed them something, even after everything that had happened. During the dispute, things became quite personal and ugly, and I finally threatened to call the police if they didn't leave my property. My mother reminded me of all the sacrifices she had made when I was younger, ostensibly because she wanted to be a good mother, before they finally departed after more arguments. She said that I had been ungrateful the one time she had expected me to sympathize with her predicament and allow her to put other people before myself. She now claimed that, rather than the other way around, I was portraying her as the villain. Since then, this has been bothering me, and I'm having trouble figuring out whether I'm to blame, whether I've been expecting too much from my mother, or whether she's simply deceiving me. I decided to post on Reddit to get some unbiased perspectives, even though I'm quite sure I'm correct. AITA for not paying for my half-sibling's college tuition just because my stepdad and his estranged mother are having financial difficulties. Even though my uncle had excellent intentions, I reminded him that what he did was wrong and unacceptable. His actions undoubtedly had a negative effect. I wouldn't be in this predicament if he hadn't shared my life with my mother and disclosed my contact details without my consent. He apologized excessively, stating that he was unaware of their financial difficulties and that he had no idea my mother would respond in this manner. He admitted that he had no business telling my mother about my life and that if we had wanted to get back together, we would have done so without his help. Since his heart was in the right place, I don't intend to cut him out of my life. I would have been much angrier if he had meant something different. He simply made an error. In addition, it was because of him that I was initially able to attend college. He was the only person who was prepared to assume the responsibility of co-signing my loan application. If you consider it, I might not be in this situation at all if it weren't for him. I made sure to let him know that what he did wasn't appropriate, since I don't want to come across as unappreciative, but I'm also not a doormat. Whatever I did was fair enough, and I believe I found the ideal balance. We're doing great together, and I won't hold anything against him because I needed this resolution somehow. I also discussed my mom's recent struggles with my grandparents. They believe I'm correct and have promised to make an effort to persuade her to change her mind. I realized that they didn't want to lose touch with their other grandchildren, which is why they have remained in touch with my mom. They understand the struggles my mom's family's going through, but they don't think it's right or fair to put me through this. That's their position on the issue, and I believe it's reasonable enough. First update. My mother has taken it upon herself to remind me of all she did for me growing up ever since we last spoke, which was nearly 9 days ago. She probably sends me an email every other day to make me feel like I owe her something. It's not like she did me a favor by raising me alone. She was legally required to take care of me, so I don't really understand the point. She only reared me when it was convenient for her. She and her spouse decided to expel me as soon as I started to cause them trouble, citing the need to save money for the twins and their future. Now that we're in the future and the twins are adults, I believe they should rely on themselves rather than wasting time trying to manipulate and guilt-trip me. Although I had been ignoring her emails, I made the decision to reply a few days ago. I explained to her everything I had written in my essay. She didn't take it well, as expected, and labeled me ungrateful once more. I just informed her that calling me names would not alter the truth, and that I no longer wanted to have any contact with her because she had been a bad mother. I blocked her email account after that, but she made a new one to continue to annoy me. Since she never did the same for me, I blocked that one as well, and I'll keep doing so until she understands that I'm not here to mope about her. To be honest, I'm glad we're finally having this discussion because I think it will end quickly, and I'll have the necessary closure, only because I was still clinging to the hope that perhaps they had changed, that perhaps they were here to congratulate me and make amends. Did I welcome them into my house and talk to them that day? However, because I consistently work out and am much younger than her, it was simple for me to overwhelm her when I did. Fortunately, all the shouting had alerted my neighbors to the problem and caused them to call the police. They even came to my aid and restrained my mother as we awaited the arrival of the cops. I made the decision to file charges when the police eventually arrived. She is currently in a lot of trouble. In addition, I've discussed this with my attorney and requested a restraining order against her. I've been informed that Harry has taken the children and moved in with his parents. I'm not sure if he intends to come back anytime soon. He apparently challenged her about her behavior after saving her and informed her that she couldn't continue acting in this manner. She also got into a fight with him, which seems to mean she's really lost it. I believe she finds it difficult to believe that I'm doing well in life, but in all honesty, she is to blame for her own issues. I will not be sorry for her. I'll have the restraining order in place soon, and since I'm making more money, I've already started thinking about moving into a larger home. Since now seems like the ideal moment, I'm going to start exploring my options. Being linked to someone like that is embarrassing, so I sincerely hope my mother receives the support she needs and learns to behave normally. She has also been nasty to my grandparents, who have told me they no longer want to be around her. The only person she can blame for everyone avoiding her is herself. Anyway, I'm not worried about it anymore.